My husband and I, 29 years old, have been together since high school, and we were introduced by my brother. We have a beautiful 4-year-old daughter who adores Emma, my brother's ex-wife. My brother and Emma have been together for around 4 years. She is an incredible delight to be with, bringing out the best in him. Our entire family cherished her. At times, I felt like my parents loved her more than us, and the same was true for my daughter. Emma was a fairy princess to her, and every time we went to take her up, she would cry and urge us to go home and come back tomorrow because she wanted to be with Aunt Emma. Anyway, Emma was 26 weeks pregnant, 6 months, and we were all looking forward to it. My brother and she had always wanted a baby and seemed overjoyed whenever we visited them. She would have been an amazing mother. Emma had been feeling bad and her stomach hurt, so she requested my brother to drive her to the hospital, where the doctors said everything was all right and sent her home. She kept saying that she didn't feel right, but my brother dismissed it as her overreacting. The next day, my brother, husband, and their friends went for a fishing trip. Emma urged my brother not to go since she didn't feel right and needed someone to be with her. My amazing brother became mad, telling her to quit overreacting, that everything isn't about her, and that he needed some alone time. Well, he turned off his phone and proceeded on the trip. Emma called me crying and asked if I could come over because her stomach hurts. By the time I arrived, she was half conscious on a bloody floor. Rushed her to the hospital told they required her husband's signature to carry out the operation. There was a lot of bickering. Although they saved her life, we lost the baby. She woke up screaming and weeping, asking where her child and husband were. It was horrible. Both of my parents and her parents were in tears when they saw her. I kept calling the guys, none of them responded. When Emma finally calmed down, it was even more unsettling. It was as if she had given up, with no soul left in her eyes. My brother returned the next day to an empty, bloody apartment, ran to the hospital, and apologized to Emma while crying. She looked at him with no feelings and asked for a divorce. My brother grew depressed after that, and he would spend his days drinking in the baby's nursery. None of us really consoled him. I suppose we all blamed him in some way. My husband went to meet him, and when he returned, he told me about the above and asked that I apologize to my brother for neglecting him and go console him. I refused. He got angry with me and blamed Emma for the miscarriage, claiming that if she was truly ill, she should have gone to the hospital rather than making a scene, and that my brother is suffering as a result of her idiotic decision. He kept defending my brother, stating that it wasn't his fault that he wanted some alone time before the baby, and so on. I couldn't take it any longer, so I told him that if he kept defending, I would divorce him. I took my daughter and left for my parents' home. It's been 2 days and neither of us has tried talking. I'm not sure if I behaved like an AH, and recalling all he said, I believe I should at least console my brother. I suppose I wanted opinions? To add, prior to performing any life-threatening surgery, the hospital requires the patient to sign a waiver. These paperwork can be signed by the patient or their family. Because Emma was not conscious enough, they required her husband's signature. I was alone and confused, and it was a lot. The hospital agreed after much discussion, but it really caused a lot of unnecessary delay. For your information, it was a one-night trip, and they traveled to a cabin where they claimed there was no cell service. They did not think that there would be no network. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot for what it's worth. I also had an instance in which something felt wrong, and doctors sent me home. I still didn't feel good and called my OB, who demanded the hospital take me in. My husband did not once question how I felt because he trusted in me. It was a good thing that both my husband and OB supported me and didn't make me second-guess myself, like how your brother did, because my placenta ended up rupturing. I am so unbelievably sorry for the loss. Your sister-in-law was not to blame. She didn't have the support she very much needed. Maternal care is so easily overlooked. ETA. We were lucky that both my son and I survived. However, had I not been in the hospital and already hooked up for monitoring, that likely would not have been the outcome. Comment 2. Your brother's actions directly contributed to the miscarriage. Dismissing Emma's concerns, going on a trip, and turning off his phone were reckless and irresponsible. Emma experienced a traumatic loss, and your husband is blaming her for the miscarriage, which is incredibly insensitive and cruel. It's understandable that you don't want to console your brother right now. He needs to face the consequences of his actions and take responsibility for his part in the tragedy. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, Thanks for sticking with me through all of this. So, after I left for my parents' house with my daughter, things got even more complicated. My husband didn't reach out, and I didn't either. I was too angry and hurt by his words. But then, on the third day, my mom sat me down and told me that my brother had been admitted to the hospital. He had overdosed on sleeping pills. It was an unalived attempt. I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding. Seeing him lying there, hooked up to machines, was a wake-up call. I realized that despite everything, he was still my brother and he was in pain. I sat by his side, holding his hand, and for the first time in days, I cried. I cried for Emma, for the baby, for my brother, and for the mess our lives had become. When he woke up, he was a shell of the person I once knew. He apologized over and over, saying he couldn't live with the guilt. I told him that while what he did was wrong, he needed to find a way to forgive himself and move forward. It was a hard conversation, but it felt necessary. Meanwhile, Emma had moved out of their apartment and was staying with her parents. She refused to see my brother, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. She was grieving in her own way, and seeing him would only reopen the wounds. My parents tried to reach out to her, but she kept her distance. She needed space, and we had to respect that. Back at my parents' house, my daughter kept asking about her dad. It broke my heart to see her so confused. I decided to call my husband and ask him to come over so we could talk. When he arrived, he looked exhausted. We sat down, and I told him about my brother's unalived attempt. He was shocked and immediately wanted to go see him, but I stopped him. I told him we needed to talk first. We had a long, painful conversation. He admitted that he had been wrong to blame Emma and that he was just trying to protect his brother-in-law. He said he felt guilty for not being there for him and that he was scared of losing his own family. I told him that while I understood his feelings, his words had hurt me deeply. We both apologized, and for the first time in days, we hugged. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. But things didn't magically get better. My brother was discharged from the hospital, but he was a wreck. He refused to go back to the apartment, so he moved in with my parents. He spent most of his days in bed, barely eating or talking. My parents were worried sick, and I felt helpless. I tried to be there for him, but it was like he was trapped in his own world of guilt and regret. Emma, on the other hand, was trying to rebuild her life. She started seeing a therapist and joined a support group for women who had lost their babies. She was slowly finding her way, but it was clear that she was still deeply hurt. One day she called me and asked if we could meet. I agreed, and we met at a small cafe. She looked tired but determined. She told me that she was planning to move to another city to start fresh. She needed to get away from all the memories and the pain. I understood, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. She had been such a big part of our lives, and now she was leaving. We hugged, and I wished her all the best. It was a bittersweet goodbye. As for my husband and me, we decided to go to couples therapy. We needed to work through our issues and find a way to communicate better. It wasn't easy, but we were committed to making it work. Our daughter was our priority, and we wanted to give her a stable, loving home. But the past has a way of catching up with you. One evening, while we were having dinner, my husband received a call from one of his friends who had been on the fishing trip. He looked pale as he listened, and when he hung up, he told me that there was more to the story. Apparently, they had all been drinking heavily, and my brother had confided in them about his fears of becoming a father. He had been scared and overwhelmed, and that's why he had lashed out at Emma. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it added another layer to the story. My brother had been struggling, and none of us had noticed. We had all been so focused on Emma and the baby that we had overlooked his fears and insecurities. I decided to confront my brother about it. When I brought it up, he broke down. He admitted that he had been terrified of becoming a father and that he had felt like he was losing control. He said he had been drinking to cope with his anxiety and that he had pushed Emma away because he didn't know how to deal with his emotions. It was a heartbreaking conversation, but it also felt like a turning point. My brother agreed to see a therapist and start working on his issues. It was a small step, but it gave me hope. But before I get into that, there's something else. My husband and I were trying to rebuild our relationship, but the trust had been shattered. One night I found messages on his phone from a woman he had been confiding in. It wasn't an affair, but it felt like a betrayal. He had been sharing our problems with her instead of talking to me. We had another big fight, and I told him that if he wanted to save our marriage, he needed to cut off contact with her and focus on us. He agreed, but the damage was done. We were both walking on eggshells, trying to navigate this new reality. It was exhausting, and I started to wonder if we could ever truly move past this. So that's where we are now. My brother is in therapy, Emma is starting a new life, and my husband and I are trying to rebuild our marriage. It's been a rough week, and there's still a long way to go, but we're taking it one day at a time, hoping that things will get better. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my vegan friend to stop controlling where we eat and drink? My friend Lauren, 46-year-old female, is a vegan who doesn't drink. That's awesome, and I have no issue with that. The problem is that she is part of a small group of friends who don't get out very often, but when we do, it always has to be limited due to Lauren's choices. We live in an area where our food choices suck to begin with, so having to go to eat where she can be satisfied is very limited. There really isn't much to do otherwise at night. In addition, she gets upset when any one of us eats something that has obvious meat in it. For example, she doesn't say anything if we get soup with chicken or something, but if we order a hamburger, she would cause drama. Then she doesn't drink, which is no big deal, but she will then send us videos on the harmful effects of alcohol if we get a drink or two with dinner. It has gotten on my nerves, to say the least. It's been a while now, so I am done with everyone catering to her needs. I have tried inviting everyone to specific places and invite Lauren as well. Then she puts into a group chat, "Hey ladies, since I can't eat at X, why don't we go to Y?" Then of course the others decide we should go to Y instead. I have backed off of going out because I don't want to spend money on food that sucks. Remember, it's vegan, not vegetarian, so it's very limiting and is expensive. Or have my intelligence questioned by her sending stuff about the effects of alcohol, as if we are not old enough to know or Google it. I barely drink anyway, but enjoy a glass or two every so often. She asked why I keep bailing, so I told her, "I respect your choices, but by the very nature of them, they have limited mine. Being that I don't have the ability to go out often nor unlimited funds, I am only going to go when I know the entire experience will be what I want. So if I am in the mood for a steak and a vodka tonic, I want to have them in a relaxed atmosphere, and that obviously bugs you. If I'm in the mood for a salad and water, I will gladly join you, or we can just hang out at the beach when we have time during the day." She didn't like that too much. She said that isn't what friendship is about, and I should enjoy the company enough not to care. I told her that I understood, and I would gladly hang out with her when food or drink isn't in question, because it's too expensive not to enjoy it. She said that there is nothing else to do around here. Then I asked if it's just about friends, then maybe she can eat first and join us out sometimes, and other times we can go where she wants. She then told me that she's not going to sit around watching people eat meat. I said, "Okay, I get it, and you need to get that I'm not catering to your needs each time I'm free to hang out." I later got a text from a mutual friend that Lauren was upset, but she agreed with me because she was tired of the same stuff. Of course, this friend doesn't like conflict, so she just listened to Lauren. So am I the jerk for not wanting to continue to eat food I don't like, or refrain from having a drink or two to keep the peace here? Or am I right in feeling like she's being selfish, expecting the rest of us to do what she's comfortable with each time? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. She said that isn't what friendship is about, and I should enjoy the company enough not to care. Then, by the exact same logic, she should be able to shut her mouth and let you enjoy your steak and your drink in peace. Friendship isn't about constantly trying to push your values on your friends or judging their choices. She should enjoy the company enough not to care, not the idiot. Comment 2. She said that isn't what friendship is about, and I should enjoy the company enough not to care. I hate when people lack all self-awareness and say things like this without realizing it applies to them as well. Why doesn't she enjoy your company enough not to care about what you eat or drink? What a dumb person. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, a lot has happened in the past 3 months since I last updated you. After my conversation with Lauren, things were tense for a while. We didn't hang out much, and when we did, it was usually in group settings where food and drink weren't involved. I thought this arrangement was working out fine, but then something happened that changed everything. One night, our mutual friend Sarah invited us all to her place for a game night. I figured it would be a good way to hang out without any food drama. I brought a bottle of wine, thinking it would be a nice gesture for those who wanted to drink. Lauren showed up with her usual vegan snacks and herbal tea. Everything was going smoothly until I made a mistake that I didn't realize would have such a big impact. During the game, I casually mentioned a new steakhouse that had opened up in town. I didn't think much of it, but Lauren's face immediately changed. She didn't say anything at the time, but I could tell she was upset. Later that night, she sent a long message in our group chat about how she felt disrespected and excluded. She said that by talking about the steakhouse, I was undermining her lifestyle choices and making her feel unwelcome. I tried to explain that it wasn't my intention to hurt her, but she wasn't having it. She said she needed some space and left the group chat. This caused a ripple effect among our friends. Some sided with Lauren, saying I should have been more considerate, while others thought she was overreacting. The group started to fracture, and our once tight-knit circle began to drift apart. In the weeks that followed, I noticed that our mutual friends were hesitant to make plans. They didn't want to choose sides, and it felt like everyone was walking on eggshells. I reached out to Lauren privately to try and mend things, but she was still hurt and didn't want to talk. I felt guilty and frustrated, not knowing how to fix the situation. Then, something unexpected happened. Sarah, who had always been the peacemaker, decided to host a mediation session. She invited both Lauren and me, along with a couple of other friends, to sit down and talk things out. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed, hoping it would help clear the air. During the mediation, Lauren opened up about how isolated she felt because of her lifestyle choices. She said that being vegan and not drinking made her feel like an outsider, and my comment about the steakhouse was the tipping point. I listened and realized that I had been so focused on my own frustrations that I hadn't considered how she felt. I apologized sincerely, and we talked about finding a balance that would work for everyone. We agreed to be more mindful of each other's preferences and to communicate better. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As we tried to rebuild our friendship, I learned more about Lauren's background. She grew up in a family where meat and alcohol were staples, and she had always felt pressured to conform. When she became vegan and stopped drinking, it was her way of taking control of her life and making choices that aligned with her values. Knowing this made me understand her better and appreciate the strength it took for her to stand by her beliefs. In the meantime, our group started to find new ways to hang out that didn't revolve around food and drink. We went hiking, had movie nights, and even tried out some vegan cooking classes together. It was a learning experience for all of us, and it brought us closer in unexpected ways. However, not everything was smooth sailing. There were still moments of tension and misunderstandings. For example, one night we decided to go to a new restaurant that had both vegan and non-vegan options. I thought it was a good compromise, but Lauren felt uncomfortable seeing meat on the menu. It was a reminder that finding a balance would be an ongoing process. Despite the challenges, I noticed a positive change in our group dynamics. We were more open and honest with each other, and we made an effort to include everyone in the decision-making process. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it to maintain our friendships. Looking back, I realized that my mistake had been a catalyst for growth. It forced us to confront our differences and find ways to coexist. It also taught me the importance of empathy and understanding. I learned that friendship isn't just about having fun together. It's about supporting each other and respecting each other's choices. So that's where things stand now. We're still navigating the complexities of our different lifestyles, but we're doing it together. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for leaving my husband after he treated our son like a stranger, but let his mom roughhouse our newborn? My husband and I have been together since my oldest, 13 years old, was 2. I was told years ago I would never be able to conceive another child due to only having one fallopian tube. One had to be removed, and having significant scarring. However, we did end up pregnant last year by some miracle, and I just gave birth to our daughter 3 weeks ago. Everyone was over the moon, including my son. He had wanted a sibling and had been asking since he was easily 3 or 4. But my husband is weird now, or at least in my eyes, and I guess that is what I'm here to talk about. So, if my son kisses the baby on the forehead, my husband starts freaking out. "Don't you ever kiss that baby again? That's disgusting. You could give her a virus," etc., etc. If my son moves even a centimeter while holding the baby, my husband is freaking out. "Don't move like that. You're going to hurt her head." If my son blows raspberries on the baby's belly, my husband tells him to stop, saying he's being too rough. He has become a jerk helicopter parent, filled with paranoia and anxiety, but refuses to be seen by a doctor, And I'm starting to rage. To a point where I have an appointment to get tested for postpartum rage, but I truly don't think I have it. I think my husband is triggering me. But here's the massive issue. My mother-in-law came here yesterday and full-on kissed our daughter right beside her mouth, and my husband didn't say shoot, just sat there smiling. So I stepped in and said exactly what he said to my son. I said, "Don't you ever kiss that baby again? That's disgusting. You are going to give her a virus." She immediately stopped. But then she started swinging our daughter in a football hold with her head pointed down toward the floor. She was going pretty fast, to a point of a startle reflex. So I immediately told her to stop holding the baby like that and that she's being too rough. She says, "I've had 4 kids. I am not dumb." So I said, "I don't care." She stops, hands off the baby, and then left maybe 5 minutes later. My husband asks why I'm being such a jerk to his mom, so I said, "Why are you being such a jerk to my son?" He asked what I meant and asked for examples, so I gave him the side-by-side comparison examples to his mother versus my son. He shakes his head and said, "I'm making shoot up." I know for a fact I'm not making anything up at all. I've spoken to him before about getting for my son's case and said plainly to back off my son, or I'm going to treat all of his family members the same way he's been treating my son due to his paranoia, and it will make it so no one comes around anymore. He says I'm taking shoot too far, that kids have germs and are more rough and clumsy. I told him I didn't give a frick, and to add, I have talked to him about his comments to my son, right in front of my son and in private. He says I'm blowing things out of proportion. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, I'm having postpartum rage on your behalf and I'm a male. That's how messed up families are created? It's like reading about the background story of a supervillain's past. Don't let your son down. Don't back off on this issue because he needs you to fight this battle for him. I hope that now your husband, while being stubborn, has understood what he did and your stance on it. Maybe ask your mother-in-law for forgiveness if what you said to her was uncalled for. It's okay to prove a point, but not at someone else's expense. Comment 2. Not the idiot, I get that some people feel that OP was just taking it out on the mother-in-law. But the truth is, no one should be kissing babies near their mouths, let alone swinging them around. I'll quote Judge Judy and say, "It's called an accident, not an on purpose." Accidents happen, and intent doesn't mean much if your kid is seriously hurt. OP's husband is being a hypocritical jerk, even if postpartum depression is involved. Hopefully they navigate through this. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. Things have been pretty intense these past 2 weeks, and I feel like I'm at my breaking point. My husband's behavior hasn't improved, and it's starting to affect our entire household. Last week, my son was holding the baby while sitting on the couch. He was being so gentle, just like I showed him, but my husband walked in and immediately started yelling at him to put the baby down. My son looked so hurt and confused. He handed the baby to me and ran to his room. I followed him and found him crying. He said he felt like he couldn't do anything right and that his stepdad didn't love him anymore. It broke my heart. I tried to comfort him, but I could see the damage was done. That same night, I confronted my husband again. I told him he was pushing our son away and that he needed to stop. He got defensive and said he was just trying to protect the baby. I told him that our son needed to feel loved and trusted too. He just shook his head and walked away. A few days later, my mother-in-law came over again. This time, she brought a friend with her. They were both cooing over the baby, and my mother-in-law's friend asked to hold her. I was hesitant, but before I could say anything, my husband handed the baby over. I watched in horror as this stranger kissed my baby on the cheek. I felt my blood boil. I took the baby back and told them both that no one was allowed to kiss her. My mother-in-law rolled her eyes and said I was being overprotective. I couldn't believe it. My husband just stood there, not saying a word. Later that night, I told my husband that if he didn't start treating our son better and stop letting his family do whatever they wanted with the baby, I would leave. He looked shocked and asked if I was serious. I told him I was. I couldn't keep living like this. He promised he would try to do better, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The next day, my son came home from school with a drawing he made for the baby. It was a picture of our family, all holding hands. He was so proud of it and wanted to show it to his stepdad. When my husband saw it, he smiled and told my son it was beautiful. It was the first time in weeks that I saw my son genuinely happy. I thought maybe things were starting to turn around. But then, 2 days ago, my husband's paranoia hit a new level. He came home from work and saw my son playing with the baby's toys. He freaked out, saying my son was going to break them and that they were too expensive to replace. My son looked crushed. He put the toys down and went to his room without a word. I couldn't take it anymore. I told my husband that he was being ridiculous and that he needed to get help. He refused, saying he was fine and that I was the one overreacting. That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag for me and the kids and told my husband we were leaving. He looked stunned and asked where we were going. I told him we were going to stay with my sister for a while. He begged me to stay, saying he would change. I told him he needed to prove it. He needed to see a doctor and get help for his anxiety. He agreed, but I could see the fear in his eyes. We've been at my sister's house for 2 days now. My son seems happier and the baby is doing well. My husband called yesterday and told me he made an appointment with a therapist. He said he realized he needed help and that he wanted to be a better father and husband. I told him I was proud of him and that we would come home once he started getting the help he needed. I know it's going to be a long road, but I'm hopeful. My husband's willingness to get help is a step in the right direction. I just want our family to be happy and healthy. Thank you for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.